Okay, so we're going to be continuing on with the Great Depression. So we've talked about how poverty is affecting a lot of these families. We've talked about the Dust Bowl and what it's like in the more rural parts of America. So now we're going to talk about how all of this is really going to be reflecting on President Hoover and how this is going to sort of lead to the end of his presidency. But first I want to touch on how exactly the Depression is affecting our minorities different from everyone else. So President Hoover's the first person to actually use the word depression to describe the current economic crisis instead of the old word, which was a panic. And I think that depression is much more of an appropriate term for what's happening here versus panic. Panic implies that it's sort of short, but depression, I mean, it went on for 10 years. Depression is definitely a more appropriate word. So families are going to be hit incredibly hard as employment is continuing to rise. Children are going to be forced to quit school and work. A lot will end up homeless. But our minorities are going to be hit the hardest, considering that they were already at the bottom of the socioeconomic ladder. Unemployment in the Black community alone will be 50% compared to the 25% overall unemployment rate of the Great Depression. A lot of Mexicans will also lose their jobs, as a lot of Midwesterners and Dust Bowl refugees, so to speak, are going to be moving west. And the U.S. government is even going to encourage a lot of Mexicans to move back to Mexico in a program or a policy that we call repatriation. So Herbert Hoover isn't really doing anything at this point to help anyone out. And it's really, really starting to reflect badly on his presidency. As you can see here, we're blaming him really for everything. And at first, he doesn't do anything. That was his first plan, actually. Plan A for Herbert Hoover was not to do anything. He said that the economy would fix itself. Now, in reality, he's right. The economy would have fixed itself, but it could have taken decades. The way economics and capitalism works is that, yes, inevitably, eventually, demand would have increased again, and the supply would have caught up, and we all would have gotten back on track. But it might not have been until, I don't know, the 1980s. It could have been 100 years. It could have been a really, really long time. And we had people who were living in really, really desperate situations at that point. I mean, they needed help immediately. So the do-nothing plan was a bad plan, and it wasn't going to work. Plan number 2 was called volunteerism. He literally thought that wealthy people would volunteer to help the poor. This is not going to work. It's not going to work for many reasons, but the biggest reason is that there's just not enough wealthy people out there to actually help the poor. That was one of the problems leading up to the Great Depression, right? The distribution of wealth. Well, it's still a problem when you try to rely on wealthy people to solve your issues. And then his third plan is called localism. He thought that with economic policy, the problems should be solved on local levels. But unfortunately, the problem is much bigger than that. This is a global depression here. And changing some laws in Guilford County or the state of North Carolina isn't going to help to pull the rest of the world out of a depression. And that's what we really needed. So Hoover's just not really a strong enough leader at this point. Like I said, we're going to be naming everything that signals being poor after him. We've got Hoover wagons, which are trucks pulled by horses because you're too poor to afford the gas, or Hoover heaters, which are campfires, or Hoover houses, cardboard boxes. So basically everyone is hardcore blaming Hoover for the fact that no progress is being made. So he's finally going to try and make one sort of like last-ditch effort at helping everyone. And he's going to form something called the RFC, the Reconstruction Finance Corporation. And this is going to be $1 billion bailout, basically, to railroad companies and big businesses and banks. So this is all part of trickle-down economics. We want to funnel money into the top, the business owners, the people who give money away. So we want to give money to businesses so that they can hire people and expand, put people back to work. And we want to give money to banks so that they can start lending, making more loans, and we can see more growth and progress. Now, trickle-down economics is a sound theory, and it's logical, and it works, but it cannot work as quickly as you need when you are in that much of a problem, or in that much sort of an economic hole or an economic valley. The only time that it really works that quickly is when you're already doing sort of okay economically. When you're really, really at the bottom of the totem pole, this is not going to be enough. So unfortunately, it's not really going to do much to help out the United States. One thing it will do is it is the group that helps fund and build the Hoover Dam. So the Hoover Dam is going to provide hydroelectric power and water to a large portion of the Southwest, Southern California, New Mexico, Nevada, Arizona. A lot of those places are going to get power and water from the Hoover Dam. Now, some people are starting to think that maybe socialism or communism is the only solution. And we're starting to see a lot of these ideas already take hold in places in Europe. A lot more radical political ideas are becoming a lot more popular in Europe, especially because we're really struggling economically. It's the Great Depression for us. But they, believe it or not, are doing even worse than we are. A lot of Europe is doing really, really badly right now. So fascism, socialism, communism, these are already taking hold in Europe. This is when Hitler is coming to power. This is when Mussolini is coming to power. And it's really because of how desperate a lot of people were. But luckily, the whole idea of the American dream, liberty, freedom, capitalism, all of that is still too strong for it to fully take hold. But the last sort of nail in the coffin for President Hoover is going to be this. This is the bonus army. So back at the end of World War I, Congress passed a bill that promised the bonuses would be issued to all World War I veterans. When the market snagged in 1929, we passed a new bill called the Adjusted Compensation Act, which said that they would get their bonuses, but we were going to put it off for 15 years. They would get their bonuses in 1945. The problem is by 1931, a lot of their vets need their money now. So Congress is like, okay, yes, you need the money now. We'll give it to you now. So they write up a new bill that would give out the bonuses at that moment, but Hoover vetoed it. So in the summer of 1932, 20,000 veterans marched on Washington. They started setting up camps in public places, occupied empty government buildings, and riots broke out every time the police tried to remove them. So Hoover finally decided that he would call in federal troops to forcibly remove homeless veterans from our nation's capital. I'm sure you can imagine how well that's going to go. So these troops are going to be led by Douglas MacArthur, the son of Arthur MacArthur, who we saw in the American-Filipino War. And we will talk about Douglas MacArthur again next unit when we talk about World War II. He'll be a very big player. But MacArthur is only right now an agent of his chief, his commander-in-chief, which is the president. And so when the president says, get these people out of here, there's really no option but to act. So MacArthur and his troops pushed the bonus army out of the city entirely, but they had to use tear gas and bayonets. So these photos, like you see here, are going to circulate around the country, and people are going to be angry. I mean, tear gassing veterans, that is a no-no. So by this time, there's really no way that Hoover's going to win re-election, and he won't. He will lose to our next president, who will be Franklin D. Roosevelt, FDR. And we will talk about FDR and his program for helping us during the Great Depression in the next video.